Hey, how you doing? Well, Halloween's over, and today I am going to be spending a couple hours taking down all the Halloween decorations. Um, and it occurred to me that as I was taking the bales of hay off my truck from our hayride, that in the city I see a lot of people with really cool Halloween decorations outside their house, but a lot of them do have the smaller or larger bales of hay. I think you can buy them at like places like Home Depot, Menards. I think maybe even some of the pumpkin farms might sell them. And then after Halloween, a lot of people don't know what to do with the hay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today because I'm actually doing that right now as we speak. And what I do with the hay is I have a few things I do with it. One is I had I bought 5 bales of it. And so what I'm doing is I put a bedding of hay on the floor of my greenhouse. And then in the garden, I do on the ground as well, just because it looks nicer and it smells nice. But I also put the hay inside the planters for a bedding over the winter. And that hay will turn into compost. And there's a few, there's a good handful of benefits for using leftover hay. Number one, it will put nutrients into your dirt. So if you have a garden in your backyard, you can spread the hay out there, a nice thick layer of it. And that does break down. And come spring, what I've done and has worked really well for me is I've actually just moved the hay aside and then put my plants in. The hay will act as a weed barrier, like a mulch. And you'll have a lot less weeds if you put a bed of hay or straw in your planter, your gardens, whatever. I'm also putting it around my fruit trees. This year I planted 2 apple and 2 pear trees. And I just started putting a layer around. I'm going to make the layers a little thicker, a little bit bigger. I'm going to show them to you in a second. But what that does for your trees and for anything that you still might have in ground over the winter is it's a weed block. It keeps moisture in the soil. It also acts as a little bit of a warmth barrier for the roots of your trees or your plants, believe it or not. It also acts as like a bit of a blanket for the things that are good for your plants and trees, like earthworms, those type of things. Now, the other thing I'm going to show you in a second is for me is I'm putting a big layer of hay over both of my Oogle gardens, which I planted in this year. I actually made those this year. And the worst case scenario is it's great compost. So if you have a compost pile, just throw it over in the pile. That's it. Leave it alone. This is one of my pear trees, and I just started putting some of the hay around that as a bedding. You don't want to put the hay or any kind of mulch right up against the trunk of the tree. You want to kind of move it away from the base of the tree there and put it around it. I'm going to actually make that a lot bigger. But again, all the nutrients from the hay will break down, go into the dirt, feed the tree, and also will help keep the weeds from popping up in spring. That's why I'm going to make it thicker. And it also keeps the roots a bit warmer in the winter time. Okay, so I took 1 bale of hay, which I've got down to about 1/3 of its size, and I just put it all over my Oogle garden. A nice big thick, probably about a 7 or 8 inch thick bed of it. And I'm going to let that sit over the winter. And that's what I'm going to be planting my vines in next spring. Now, this one I haven't done yet, but I set the bale of hay here. Okay, I'm going to be putting that over that Oogle garden because all that straw now has been kind of beaten down over the spring and summer and time to refresh it. So most of this hay will go on that Oogle garden. And again, I'll be planting vines in there as well. This is one of my apple trees I planted. It was a twig when I planted it in the spring. It did really well this year. And again, I put a nice thick layer of hay around that. And I do it with the other 2 trees, the other pear and the other apple tree as well. And again, it protects the tree, keeps the ground warm. It will help keep the weeds out of there come spring and help keep the roots and the little worms underneath warm this winter. Again, in the garden, we took all of our scary bones out of the garden from Halloween. And what I will be doing is I'll be putting a layer of this hay throughout the entire garden. A couple inches of it. I still have to pull some of the plants that are now dead out, but I will line that. Anything left over, I will put on the ground. As you can see, I do get weeds that grow in the ground. During the summer, I try my best to keep up with it, but it gets kind of hard. But wherever I put the hay, it really does stifle the growth of the weeds. So again, hopefully some of this helps, gives you an idea of what you can do with your leftover hay. Well, this is just a short little video to kind of give you some ideas of what you can do with your leftover hay if you bought that for some decorations. So if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please feel free to write them in. Appreciate you checking out my videos. If you're feeling it, please like and subscribe, and feel free to share.